This is Andy Schuman for Medgizmos, and I have the pleasure of talking with Jim Berbee, who is the CEO of WiscMed and the inventor of a digital otoscope that I've been using for several months and I've been enjoying, called the Wispr. So welcome, Jim. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Schuman. I appreciate the chance to chat with you and your audience.
So can you tell us more about yourself? I know you've got a very interesting background because you were a very successful engineer before you decided to go into medicine. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, the way I've typically gotten in trouble in my life is starting out with the question, how hard can it be? And I certainly found out about medicine, how hard that can be. So you're exactly right. I was originally trained as an engineer and also in business. Worked for IBM for a small number of years, and then started my own technology company, which I eventually sold almost 15 years ago now. And I was still in my 40s when I sold that company, and I was thinking about what to do next. And I thought, how hard can medicine be? So I applied to medical school and got admitted into Stanford and went to Stanford Medical School, and then afterwards did an emergency medicine residency at the University of Wisconsin. And so that kind of led me to where I am right now as a middle-aged, relatively new doctor.
Yeah, good for you. Congratulations
Thanks.
on
Well,
all
thanks. I
your
love it.
successes.
It's
What
been an honor.
made you decide as an emergency room physician that you need to improve upon our standard otoscope?
Well, again, it was the question of how hard can it be. I was so frustrated because I was probably 48 years old, and my attending would ask me to go in and see a young pediatric patient, and the question would be a child with a fever, of course, that we see constantly, likely with some kind of a viral infection. And the attending physician would always ask me, well, Jim, what did you see in the ears? And I would just kind of lower my head and shake my head and admit to my attending physician that I'm sorry, I couldn't see a darn thing. I couldn't. There's wax. There's a tiny eardrum. The kid was moving all over the place. I couldn't see anything. And it just every time I did that, I was so humiliated that I couldn't see anything. That I figured there had to be a better way, and I couldn't believe I was the only one having those problems. And so I thought naively that we'd start out on a project to create a better way to look at the eardrum, and that it might take a number of months for us to finish the project. And this was back in 2014. It actually took us 6 years, incredible amount of time, incredible amount of energy, incredible amount of money to develop and come up with the WiscMed Wispr, with our real focus on making it clinically relevant to people that work every day taking care of our youngest patients.
So it was an idea that you had while you were in residency or medical school, or was it while you were an emergency room physician?
Well, no, it was towards the end of my residency. So I was just finishing, well, it was probably the last maybe 2 years of my emergency medicine residency at the University of Wisconsin that began working on this project. And I reached out to my colleagues, Dr. Rabella and Dr. Hamadani, and said, I think we can do something better here. And would you be interested in working on this with me? They said, sure, it sounds great. And so we began in my final year of residency really working on this. And it was just so many missteps of trying to get to the right solution that we've come up with. The thing I tell everybody is, when you're trying to create a medical device, if you only have one constraint, it's easy to come up with a solution. So if you said to me, I just need an image of the eardrum, okay, we can do that. That's no problem. But then when you say I need an image of the eardrum in our smallest patients with the smallest canals, likely occluded by cerumen, by the way, I have to be able to drop the device all day long. It has to be robust, it has to be clean between patients. It can't change the workflow of the doctor, so it has to fit on standard equipment that's already in their exam room. Every time you add one of these constraints, it makes development and cost go up, significantly. And that was what took us 6 years to do, was to figure out an engineering solution and a clinical solution to all the constraints that are really in place to make a useful device. Plenty of people have put a digital camera, at the end of something and called it a digital otoscope. And many times it just doesn't actually work very well. So for example, throwing it on an iPhone, for example, it's very clumsy, right? Or the speculum's way too large for a pediatric patient. And so addressing all those things was really quite tricky.
Right. Tell me a bit about your colleagues. Are they ENT physicians or engineers or?
Yeah, my colleagues, Dr. Greg Rabella, is a pediatric emergency physician and an entrepreneur in his own right. He's actually built a company that created bears for pediatric patients. And then my other colleague, Dr. Azita Hamadani, she is actually the chair of the Department of Emergency Medicine, and also quite interested in entrepreneurial activities and interested in figuring out ways that we can actually advance the care that we provide to patients.
Okay, very good. So tell me about the 6-year journey to the current version of the Wispr. And do you have a Wispr with you there that you can?
I'm sorry, this is maybe the first time in 3 years that I don't have a Wispr with me. I'm actually traveling out of town, and so I didn't have one with me. But yeah, I'd be happy to tell you. Are you interested maybe in some of the challenges that we overcame?
Yeah. So sometimes the journey is more interesting than the final product, and one needs to appreciate how hard these challenges are to appreciate the final project. So yeah, describe the journey.
Sure. So the first criteria we had was this focus on smallness, and Dr. Schuman, I think you can appreciate that, being a user of the Wispr, how really very, very small the speculum is that's associated with the Wispr. And the reason for that, of course, is the pediatric canal is perhaps half the diameter of an adult canal, which then from an area perspective means there's a square function there. And then of course our kids always have a shocking amount of wax blocking their canal too. So the first problem was, how do we make this as small as possible? And we found a camera the camera is about 1 millimeter on a side. So the camera, if you put it down on your desk, there'd be a good chance you wouldn't even see it. That's how tiny it is. So our first challenge was, we found the camera, but then how do we provide enough light for the camera? And so what some people have done is they've put LEDs around the camera, LED lights around the camera. But the problem with that is LEDs are very large, and shockingly, they're quite hot too. So if you use the device for just a few seconds, now you've got a very hot probe that you're about to put in a child's ear, and that's really unsatisfactory. So our first challenge was really, how do we keep a very, very small probe that will fit in a pediatric canal and at the same time provide enough light for it? And so after much trial and error, we were able to use fiber strands to deliver light from an LED that's distal to the camera. And so then the light is transmitted via these fibers to the end of the device. And you probably don't realize it when you look at it, but surrounding that 1 millimeter camera I just described, there's actually almost 800 strands, fiber strands, that deliver an intense amount of light that camera requires to the very end. So that was probably the first big challenge we overcame, and that took many years. And I'm very much shortcutting all the effort that was involved. We tried things, for example, we tried at first to create a speculum that was translucent. So we created a translucent speculum, and we tried to use the speculum to be the light transmitting source, and that didn't work. And we tried LEDs, we tried all sorts of things until we came up with this very elegant solution of transmitting light with 800 fiber optics. And the result is a probe that's less than, about 2 millimeters in diameter, so very, very small, which gives us the great access. So that was probably the first notable problem. And then I think our real breakthrough came when we were initially going to create sort of the entire device ourselves. In other words, the battery, the handle, everything ourselves. And we stopped and we thought to ourselves, that's just not going to work, because what we don't want is, we don't want Dr. Schuman to have that device in a drawer or a cabinet somewhere and have to go get it every time that he wants to use it. And so one of our big breakthroughs, I think, was when we took the time to make the Wispr fit onto Welch Allen handles. So Welch Allen handles, are essentially industry standard in the United States. They're in every exam room. The prolific battery handles, and it turns out that connector is a sort of a public domain connector, the mechanical connector that connects it. But the challenge that we had is, since we don't have any control of the handle, Welch Allyn makes those. Welch Allyn made many generations of handles. There's many generations of wall mounts. There's many generations of the battery handles that I'm sure your audience appreciates. And shockingly, each one of those handles delivers a slightly different amount of power in terms of amperage and voltage. And each one delivers the power in a slightly different way. So for example, when you turn on the handles, they ramp up the voltage in a slightly different way. And certainly that's no problem for a classic analog otoscope that all you're doing is powering a light bulb, right? But the Wispr has 6 circuit boards inside of it, and it's very sensitive to the power that's supplied to it, just as any computer would be. And so for us, it was almost a miracle what our engineers were able to do to make the Wispr accept all these different variations on power and operate correctly. I often compare it to the movie Apollo 13, where the engineers needed, 2 more amps to open the parachutes, when the capsule's on its way down. It was like, we went through, agony of trying to figure out how we could optimize the power that was being given to us to make sure that our device worked.
Right. Very, very good. So as you know, I'm very impressed by the device. I use it virtually daily. I think patients like the fact that I can share with them my observations and discuss it, and that gives my exam more impact. You also have given us the capability to download the images to a USB stick and then to put that into the emergency health or the electronic health record. So that's awesome. So tell us some of the newer changes you've made, because in the context of COVID-19 and the pandemic, this is an ideal device to use when you're wearing PPE, and you've also made some changes that make it more kid-friendly. If you can tell us about both of those.
Sure. So, first from the personal protective equipment, PPE environment, the Wispr really is a nice device in the current COVID environment that we're all living through. And the reason for that is the Wispr has a built-in LCD screen. And so when you're doing your exam of your patients, your face is actually, I'd say maybe about 2 feet maybe from the LCD screen. So I think we all know, all of us practicing physicians know that with a typical analog otoscope, your eye is right up next to the otoscope, and you're right up next to the patient's face as you're trying to see through that magnified tunnel to see the eardrum in a standard analog traditional otoscope. The change with the Wispr is that since you're almost 2 feet away from the patient, you're holding the device at arm's length. You can have full PPE, including face masks, including a face shield, and it doesn't affect your ability to do the exam at all with the Wispr. And so it's really been a nice benefit, completely unexpected and completely unplanned for from our perspective, but a really nice benefit of being able to maintain, a little bit of distance in these times when we'd all, both the patient and the provider would, certainly prefer to maintain distance when possible. One of the things that we continue to try and do with the Wispr is we continue to try and improve the functionality based on feedback that we get from our customers. A pediatric customer of ours made a suggestion to us. He said, what I always do with my pediatric patients is I always say, what do you think I'm going to see in your ear to build rapport before the exam? Do you think I'll see a coin? Do you think I'll see a dragon? Do you think I'll see a unicorn? And he suggested to us, it would be really fun if on the Wispr, I could show the child an image before I did the exam to build that rapport, and maybe after the exam to kind of have fun of, oh my goodness, look what I found in your ear. And so we took that feedback, and we went ahead and had our engineers develop a new version of the software that implemented something we call pediatric mode, which allows for those whimsical pictures to be shown. At the same time, we serve different markets. So we certainly serve the pediatric market, and it's very important to us, and certainly one of the top ones for us. But we also serve the ENT market. And our friends at our ENTs would maybe be less interested in that sort of whimsical presentation of images. And so we were very thoughtful about how we did it. And there's actually a toggle in the software to allow that mode to be either on or off. And so if you're an ENT that sees only adult patients, it probably doesn't make sense to have that mode turned on. And so in the configuration of the device, it's a very simple little on-off toggle that says, I don't want to have pediatric mode available. And so that's really been our focus, is making sure that we're maintaining a serious, robust clinical tool that meets the needs of our customers and that doesn't distract, again, from the workflow that is relevant to the specialty that our customer is serving.
So I wrote an article recently that's been published in Contemporary Pediatrics that talked about the importance of hearing screening in the pediatric population. And I make the point that if you do hearing screening, part of the evaluation also includes an examination of the ear canal as well as the tympanic membrane, because if you detect a hearing loss, you have to make a determination: is there fluid behind the tympanic membrane? Is there wax in the canal? And so forth. So I think more and more pediatricians will acquire the Wispr as they become more aggressive in doing appropriate hearing screening in patients. And that means the market will probably open up to audiologists as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. I think, we've, at WiscMed, just because we're physicians and it's our background, we've really focused mostly so far on the ENT, pediatrician and ENT market. But certainly I think this device can be useful in, family medicine and internists. We actually had a rheumatologist that purchased the device, interestingly enough. And certainly audiologists, are also likely to be a real key market for us. And the interesting thing about the device is, again, because of how small the geometry of the speculum is, even on, infants that are only a few days old, you can get a satisfactory exam with the device, which I certainly have never been able to do with an analog otoscope, but I have no doubt that my more sophisticated pediatric colleagues are probably able to do that. But the Wispr really makes it easy.
You and I have talked briefly about its utilization beyond the ear, and I think you mentioned to me that it's good for looking at foreign bodies in the nose.
Yes. So I need to be very clear that the device is optimized for the ear.
Right.
It's optimized for the geometry of the ear, the depth of the ear, all that type of thing. The lighting is optimized for the ear canal. However, just like we use an analog otoscope in many places that it wasn't maybe designed for, the Wispr is also used that way. And on our website, we have many examples of foreign bodies, not just in ears, but in other places. So the nasal foreign bodies, it's actually pretty good at being able to see nasal foreign bodies and help with extraction of those with like a CATS extractor. We also just this week will be publishing a really interesting image of a 2-year-old that grandmother left the room, as we all know, for literally seconds. And the child swallowed quite a large spring, well, didn't swallow, but got quite a large spring in the posterior pharynx. And so we have a very nice, interesting image coming out this week showing the spring that was visualized with the Wispr in the posterior pharynx. So it certainly works in those environments. I will say again that it is not optimized for those environments, but it's oftentimes the best tool that you have available to you.
So good disclaimer. So let's imagine that the COVID epidemic is going or gone, and you're selling lots and lots and lots of Wisprs. What are you going to do with the device then? Are you going to make a wireless version, as you discussed previously? Are you going to make attachments so we can use it as a dermatoscope, perhaps, or an endoscope?
Yeah, I think our focus is on, what is the optimum way that we can extend the value of the device to our customers. And probably the number one thing that we're thinking of, and I suspect Dr. Schuman, you see this all the time, is not just identifying foreign bodies, but extracting foreign bodies. And so what happens all the time, to me at least, is I'll see the foreign body, and you and I both know that we get one chance to get that foreign body out before the kid won't tolerate it anymore.
Right.
And so because the visualization is so great, we've got some patents that we're working on for actually removing under direct visualization that foreign body, so that the downside is if you don't get that foreign body out in that first attempt, now the child has got an appointment with ENT, they're going to the operating room, there's going to be anesthesia, it's going to be a $10,000 bill minimum. And so that's one of the, I think, the really high value things that we can add is that that foreign body removal tool. So we've got a number of different devices and tools that we're developing that not in the near term, that we think will really extend the functionality of it. And the other thing, of course, being the endoscopic tools that we previously discussed. We think that has really some merits. Interestingly enough, ENT providers, they have all the really great microscopes and tools and things like that.
They do.
But if they want to do something quick and dirty, they love the Wispr because it gives them 90% of what they need very, very quickly, and they don't have to break out all the microscopes and their sterile tools and things like that. And I think that the Wispr, if we continue to extend like the endoscopic capabilities, I think it will have a similar utility for our friends in ENT, where it's maybe not the tool they would use, if they had a surgical evaluation, but if they just wanted to take a quick peek back in the throat, but that wasn't really the primary reason the patient was there. That's the type of thing I think we can really help with too.
And I will say, Jim, I'm very impressed by your website and the fact that you send out emails with interesting images. So you're doing quite a bit to educate pediatricians, residents, and you've discovered a lot of interesting findings along the way.
Yeah, Dr. Schuman, I've learned, I'm just an emergency physician, right? And I've learned more about the ear than I ever wanted to know about the ear. But it's amazing how interesting it is, and what a beautiful piece of bioengineering the whole ear
is.
It's just absolutely amazing. And we have been working hard. You're right. So when we send out the interesting images, I'm sure you've noted that we try to do a little bit of education too. So here's the image. Here's what the image shows. Here was the treatment the patient got. Here was the resolution. Here's the things that you have to watch out for when you see this particular condition. And so we've really been trying hard to do more than just show an image, but to give some information that people would find useful in their day-to-day clinical work.
Okay, so thank you, Jim. And I'm going to stop the video now, but I invite Medgizmo viewers to review the review on our website, as well as to view this interview. And I've got upcoming articles coming out in Contemporary Peds that will further discuss the Wispr.
Terrific. I really appreciate it, Dr. Schuman. Always good to chat with you.